Sergeant Miller's sneering command cut through the desert air. "Take off that uniform. Fraud." Captain Nyla Rhodes, a black woman, faced public humiliation, her composure unwavering. But just as the insult hung heavy, a voice from the control tower shattered the tension, clearing her for an F-22 Raptor. What unfolded next wasn't just a flight, but a high-stakes unraveling of a conspiracy. Nyla Rhodes stood on the sun-baked tarmac, the desert wind whipping at her uniform. Her flight suit, immaculately pressed, bore the insignia of a captain. Around her, the buzz of activity was constant. Ground crews moved with practiced efficiency. Jet engines whined, and the distant rumble of a landing transport aircraft vibrated through the air. She was supervising a pre-flight check on a logistics drone, her eyes scanning the readouts with sharp precision. 5 soldiers from a newly arrived infantry detachment stood nearby, observing the bustling airfield, their conversation a low murmur. A sharp voice cut through the drone of the base. "Hey you, the one in the flight suit." Nyla turned slowly. Sergeant Miller, a stocky, red-faced man with a permanent scowl etched into his features, strode towards her. His rank insignia gleamed, but his demeanor was far from professional. His gaze, narrowed and contemptuous, swept over her, lingering on her dark skin before fixating on her uniform. The 5 soldiers behind him straightened, their murmurs ceasing. The air thickened, the usual cacophony of the airfield suddenly muted by an unspoken tension. "What do you think you're doing, walking around in that uniform?" Miller demanded, his voice carrying across the tarmac. He stopped a few feet from her, planting his feet wide, hands on his hips. His eyes dared her to challenge him. Nyla met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I am Captain Rhodes. I am performing my duty." Her voice was steady, calm, devoid of any tremor. Miller let out a derisive snort. "Captain Rhodes, right, and I'm the president. Look, sweetheart, I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, but this is a military installation. Those flight suits aren't costumes for your little TikTok videos." He gestured dismissively at her uniform. "You think you can just waltz in here, put on a uniform, and pretend to be someone you're not? This isn't some dress-up party." The 5 soldiers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Nyla and Miller. A few senior officers in the distance, drawn by the raised voices, paused, their attention snagged by the unfolding confrontation. The ground crews, though still working, cast surreptitious glances, the rhythm of their tasks subtly disturbed. "I am a commissioned officer of the United States Air Force," Nyla stated, her voice still level, but a steel edge now present. "My credentials are on file. I advise you to review them before making such baseless accusations." Miller laughed, a harsh, grating sound that seemed to mock the entire airfield. "Baseless? Look at you, a woman like you, flying one of our birds. Please, you probably picked that uniform up at a surplus store. You're disgracing the uniform. Captain, whatever your fake name is." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Now, I'm telling you, right here, right now, take off that uniform. Right off, or I'll have you arrested for impersonation. You think I haven't seen your kind trying to pull stunts before?" His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken prejudice. The accusation of impersonation was a direct assault on her identity, her service, and her very presence on the base. The 5 soldiers watched, their faces a mixture of confusion and unease. None of them intervened. The senior officers in the distance had stopped completely, observing the scene with growing concern. The silence that had fallen over the immediate area was now absolute, broken only by the distant hum of jet engines. Nyla felt the heat of the sun on her face, but her composure remained unbroken. She had faced worse. She had trained for worse. This was merely another hurdle, another obstacle placed by someone unwilling to see beyond their own preconceived notions. Her eyes, unwavering, held Miller's. "You are making a grave mistake, Sergeant," she said, her voice dropping slightly. the steel now tempered with an icy calm that was far more menacing than any shout. I am not impersonating anyone. I am Captain Nyla Rhodes, and I am authorized to be here, in this uniform, for a very specific reason. Miller sneered. Authorized by who? Your fantasy generals. Get real. You think a pretty face and a borrowed uniform are going to fool anyone here? This is a military base, not a cosplay convention. You're a civilian, a trespasser, a fraud. And you're about to learn what happens to frauds on my watch. He reached out, his hand hovering, as if to grab her shoulder, to physically enforce his demand. The implicit threat was clear compliance or escalation. The tension ratcheted up, the air crackling with the imminent threat of physical confrontation. Nyla did not flinch. She simply stared him down, her eyes conveying a depth of resolve that few men possessed. Her hand remained at her side, unmoving. The ground crews had now mostly stopped, their faces turned towards the unfolding drama, the air thick with unspoken anticipation. Everyone waited, breathless, for her reaction, for the expected breakdown, the desperate plea, the tears. But Nyla Rhodes offered none of it. She offered only a defiant stillness, a quiet storm brewing behind her unwavering gaze. The sergeant's hand hovered, suspended in the unbearable tension. His bluff called by her absolute calm. The silence stretched, pregnant with unspoken consequences. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the flight tower's loudspeaker, startling everyone. Captain Rhodes, this is air traffic control. You are cleared for immediate pre-flight checks on Raptor designation 902. Repeat, 902. Proceed to Hangar 7. Flight parameters uploaded. The voice was clear, crisp, and official. It cut through Miller's bluster like a knife. Miller's hand dropped. His eyes widened, the sneer on his face replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. Raptor, 902, F-22. The implication was immediate, chilling. The 5 soldiers exchanged incredulous glances. The senior officers in the distance exchanged shocked looks, their previous concern now replaced by stark astonishment. The ground crews buzzed with a sudden, new energy, a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. The tension shifted, no longer focused on Nyla's humiliation, but on the impossible reality that had just been announced. The public shaming had not broken her. Instead, an unexpected public revelation had just transformed the entire situation. The stage was set, not for her downfall, but for a dramatic, undeniable vindication. The words from the loudspeaker echoed across the tarmac. Captain Rhodes, this is air traffic control. You are cleared for immediate pre-flight checks on Raptor designation 902. Repeat, 902. Proceed to Hangar 7. Flight parameters uploaded. The sound hung heavy in the air, a definitive pronouncement that shattered Miller's manufactured authority. His face, moments ago contorted in a sneer of triumph, now drained of color. His jaw sagged. He looked from Nyla to the loudspeaker, then back to Nyla, as if trying to reconcile the impossible. The 5 soldiers behind him, who had stood silently witnessing the public humiliation, now shifted, their expressions a mix of awe and dawning comprehension. The senior officers in the distance, who had been observing with a vague sense of unease, now stood absolutely still, their faces etched with shock. Nyla, however, remained impassive. Her gaze, which had never left Miller's, now held a faint, almost imperceptible hint of satisfaction. The moment was not for grand declarations or emotional outbursts. It was for quiet, undeniable action. As I was saying, Sergeant, Nyla's voice was calm, cutting through the stunned silence. I am authorized, and I have a very specific reason to be here. She then turned her head slightly, addressing the ground crew coordinator who had been hovering nervously nearby, caught between the confrontation and his duties. Corporal Davies, initiate pre-flight sequence for 902. I'll be in Hangar 7. Corporal Davies, a young man whose face was a mask of disbelief, snapped to attention. Yes, Captain immediately. He spun on his heel, yelling orders to his team, the shock still evident in his voice. The ground crews, previously distracted, now moved with a renewed, almost frantic urgency. The atmosphere had undergone a seismic shift. The casual disregard for Nyla had evaporated, replaced by a sudden, intense respect bordering on fear. Miller, still frozen in place, watched Nyla with wide, disbelieving eyes. The reality of what had just happened, what he had just accused her of, began to sink in. He had publicly humiliated a captain of the Air Force, someone cleared to fly one of the most advanced, restricted aircraft in the world, an F-22 Raptor. His entire display of arrogant superiority had just been exposed as a grotesque, career-ending blunder. His face began to flush, this time not with anger, but with a cold, desperate fear. Nyla took a single, deliberate step forward, her movement drawing all eyes back to her. She stopped directly in front of Miller. Her voice dropped, a quiet, dangerous whisper that only he could hear. "Sergeant, you challenged my identity. You challenged my service. You challenged my right to wear this uniform." Her eyes bore into his, unwavering. "Do you still wish for me to take off my uniform?" Miller recoiled as if struck. The question was a low blow, delivered with precision, twisting his earlier insult back on him. He stammered, unable to form a coherent response. His confidence had not just been punctured, it had been utterly annihilated. The 5 soldiers behind him visibly flinched. The senior officers in the distance exchanged urgent, whispered words, some already reaching for their comms, without waiting for an answer. Nyla turned. Her movements were fluid, precise. She walked directly towards Hangar 7, her posture erect, every step radiating an unshakable command. The 5 soldiers snapped to attention as she passed, their eyes following her in a mixture of awe and belated respect. They had witnessed not just a public shaming, but a public, shocking reversal of power, orchestrated by the very person who had been targeted. As Nyla approached the colossal door of Hangar 7, military mechanical technicians, already alerted, were bustling around the sleek, predatory silhouette of an F-22 Raptor. Its stealthy lines and massive engines spoke of unparalleled power and cutting-edge technology. This was not a drone, not a transport, but a top-tier combat aircraft, requiring the highest level of clearance and skill to operate. The implications of Nyla being assigned to it were profound. A senior maintenance chief, recognizing Nyla, immediately saluted. "Captain Rhodes, she's ready for pre-flight. All systems green." His voice was laced with a palpable respect, devoid of any of the earlier skepticism. Nyla nodded crisply. "Excellent. Chief, stand by for cockpit entry." She entered the hangar, the immense doors beginning to slowly close behind her, cutting off the view of the now chaotic tarmac. Outside, Miller stood alone, his face a mask of horror. The public accusation he had leveled at Nyla now hanging over his own head like a guillotine. He was acutely aware of the eyes on him, the whispers that had started among the ground crews, the hurried consultations of the senior officers, his career, his reputation, perhaps even his freedom, were now on a razor's edge. He had not simply made a mistake. He had committed an act of blatant insubordination and public defamation against an officer with a level of authority and skill he could barely comprehend. The immediate consequence of his arrogance was a sudden, terrifying plunge into an uncertain future. The silence on the tarmac, moments ago filled with the tension of his aggression, was now heavy with the weight of his utter defeat. The hangar doors groaned shut, sealing Nyla inside with the F-22 Raptor. Outside, the tarmac was a tableau of stunned silence and sudden, frantic activity. Sergeant Miller stood petrified, his horror deepening as 2 military police officers, dispatched by the now furious senior officers, strode purposefully towards him. His stammered protests were cut short as they efficiently cuffed him, leading him away, his face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and utter dread. The 5 soldiers, now fully aware of the magnitude of Miller's error, averted their eyes, grateful to not be implicated in his downfall. The ground crews, once hesitant, now moved with a new vigor, discussing the incident in hushed, awestruck tones, inside Hangar 7. The air was thick with the scent of jet fuel and ozone. The F-22 designated 902 loomed, a titan of raw power. Nyla moved around it, her movements precise, methodical. Military mechanical technicians, their earlier skepticism replaced by professional deference, followed her cues. She checked the control surfaces, the engine intakes, the weapons bay doors, her eyes missing nothing. Suddenly, a direct, official channel crackled to life in her helmet comms. "Captain Rhodes, this is Colonel Vance. You are to proceed with pre-flight. However, your flight plan has been updated. This is no longer a standard demonstration. You will be conducting a live fire exercise in Sector Gamma 7, followed by high-altitude reconnaissance. We have unexpected aerial anomalies reported in that sector." Nyla paused, her hand on a wingtip. "Colonel, with all due respect, a live fire exercise requires specific pre-briefing and targeting parameters. And aerial anomalies..." Vance's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Parameters are uploaded directly to your system. Captain, you will receive them upon cockpit entry. As for the anomalies, they are unstructured, unidentified. We require immediate visual confirmation and, if necessary, interdiction. This is a direct order. Priority Alpha." The unspoken message was clear. This was a test, a high-stakes, dangerous test. They had been publicly embarrassed by Miller's actions, and now, instead of formal apology or commendation, they were pushing her into a high-risk scenario. It was a subtle form of retaliation, a way to put her in a position where failure would be catastrophic, thereby vindicating their unspoken bias. If she faltered, if she couldn't handle the unexpected, they could then quietly sideline her, citing performance issues under pressure. The public spectacle on the tarmac had exposed a crack in their facade, and this was their attempt to seal it, by either breaking her or validating her beyond any doubt. Nyla's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "Understood. Colonel, live fire and reconnaissance in Gamma 7. Anomalies." Her voice betrayed nothing. The maintenance chief, overhearing the comms, exchanged a worried glance with his technicians. A live fire exercise. Unplanned. On a Raptor. With unidentified anomalies. This was beyond unusual. It was a thinly veiled attempt to push Nyla to her limits, or past them. The silence in the hangar was no longer just professional. It was fraught with unspoken tension and concern for the pilot. Nyla climbed the access ladder with practiced ease. The F-22's cockpit enveloped her, a sophisticated cocoon of displays and controls. She began her startup sequence, her fingers dancing across the touchscreens, her eyes scanning the diagnostics. The parameters for Gamma 7 loaded, and she saw the complex targeting data, along with a chilling note: engage targets of opportunity as designated by onboard AI. Priority eliminate hostile intent. The anomalies were being treated as potential threats. She ran through her pre-flight checklist. The familiar rhythm, a grounding force against the external pressure. This was no longer just about proving Miller wrong, it was about proving them all wrong. It was about flying a mission where failure carried real, immediate consequences, not just for her career, but potentially for the base itself if these anomalies were truly hostile. They had given her the ultimate challenge, turning her moment of vindication into a crucible. They wanted to see if the black woman who dared to wear the flight suit could truly command the most advanced fighter jet against an unknown threat. The burden of proof had been shifted, subtly but decisively, from Miller's prejudice to her performance under duress. The stakes had escalated from a public insult to a critical, potentially lethal, combat scenario. She strapped herself in, the pressure of the mission a tangible weight. The canopy hissed shut, sealing her in, ready to face the sky and the new, unknown challenges it held. The engines whined, growing into a roaring crescendo, ready to launch her into the high-stakes tests that awaited her. The F-22 Raptor, designation 902, roared to life, a symphony of raw power. Nyla initiated the taxi sequence, the colossal jet gliding with unnerving grace towards the runway. The ground crews, now silent, watched, their faces upturned, a newfound awe mixed with apprehension. The pilot they had just seen publicly demeaned was about to take command of a machine designed for aerial supremacy. 902, cleared for takeoff, runway 31, came the calm voice of air traffic control. Nyla pushed the throttles forward. The engine screamed, a guttural roar that vibrated through her very bones. The F-22 surged, gathering speed with impossible acceleration. The world outside blurred. In seconds, the nose pitched up, the landing gear retracted with a soft thud, and 902 clawed its way into the azure sky, a silent, deadly phantom against the backdrop of the desert. She climbed rapidly, the G-forces pressing her into her seat, a familiar embrace. Her eyes scanned the multifunction displays, the combat systems, the tactical map. Sector Gamma 7 pulsed green, a digital beacon drawing her towards the unknown. The flight parameters were aggressive, demanding. Her mission was to engage targets, but more crucially, to identify and interdict unstructured, unidentified aerial anomalies. The ambiguity was deliberate, a trap designed to force her into a reactive, potentially compromising situation. As she entered Gamma 7, her radar picked up multiple contacts, not the familiar signatures of known aircraft or drones. These were fragmented, shifting, almost ghost-like returns. They moved with erratic, non-standard patterns, some darting at incredible speeds, others hovering, then disappearing only to reappear elsewhere. They were testing her sensors, her targeting systems, her ability to differentiate threat from phantom. This was no simple live-fire exercise. It was a complex, high-stress scenario designed to push the limits of both pilot and machine. 902, contacts confirmed in Gamma 7. Engage as per uploaded parameters. Colonel Vance's voice crackled, devoid of any hint of the pressure he was putting on her. Nyla narrowed her eyes. She initiated a high-gain sweep with her active electronically scanned array AESA radar, pushing its capabilities. The F-22's sensor fusion system, a network of advanced sensors working in concert, began to paint a clearer picture. These weren't mere anomalies. They were highly sophisticated, stealth-capable drones, mimicking hostile signatures. But their flight paths were too precise, too orchestrated, to be truly random. They were being controlled, and they were designed to provoke. Her defiance was not in refusing the order, but in exceeding it. She wouldn't just engage, she would unmask them. She activated her passive detection systems, shifting her signature to near invisibility while simultaneously engaging in a complex series of evasive maneuvers. This was not about dogfighting, it was about data collection, about proving their setup. She began to actively record every detail, their unique signatures, their flight patterns, the distinct, almost imperceptible data burst emissions she detected. Evidence of remote command and control. The F-22, her silent ally, fed her a torrent of information, its underestimated sensor suite revealing more than her superiors had perhaps intended. Colonel, requesting clarification on target identification protocol. Nyla transmitted, her voice calm, professional. Contacts are displaying unusual signature profiles, confirming hostile intent before engagement. She was creating a paper trail, ensuring every action was logged, every ambiguity highlighted. Vance's reply was clipped. Proceed with engagement. Captain, the parameters state eliminate hostile intent. Exercise your judgment. He was pushing her to make a decision, to take the fall if anything went wrong. Nyla performed a high G turn, bringing her into a perfect firing solution on one of the anomalies. The F-22's advanced targeting system locked on, painting the drone in her HUD. Instead of firing immediately, she initiated a precision flyby, her sensors flooding the target with diagnostic data. She confirmed it a military-grade, stealth-capable drone, likely proprietary, with a unique IFF identification friend or foe signature that had been deliberately masked or corrupted. It was a test, but one that was rigged. Her moment of revenge was precise, surgical. She fired a single, non-explosive practice missile, programmed to impact with exact precision. The missile streaked across the sky, a white line against the blue, and struck the drone not to destroy it, but to disable a critical sensor array, causing it to spiral out of control and transmit a distress signal, revealing its true identity. It was a clear demonstration of her unmatched skill, not just hitting a target, but impacting a specific, non-lethal component under combat conditions, exposing its nature without destroying critical evidence. She repeated the maneuver with 2 more drones, disabling them in a similar fashion, forcing them to emit their true IFF signatures in distress signals. The airwaves were suddenly alive with the authentic, non-hostile signals of military hardware. The anomalies were exposed, not as unidentified threats, but as controlled, highly advanced assets, deliberately manipulated to appear ambiguous. "Colonel Vance," Nyla's voice was sharp, professional. "3 targets interdicted, all contacts identified as classified military drone platforms, likely from a friendly nation's advanced systems program, with intentionally obfuscated IFF, data uploaded, awaiting further instruction." The silence on the other end of the comms was deafening. Nyla had not just completed the mission, she had exposed the true nature of the anomalies, proving the insidious setup. The F-22 in her hands had not just been a weapon, but an instrument of truth, its advanced systems providing the undeniable evidence. The pressure had shifted. Nyla had turned their elaborate test into a public exposure of their questionable tactics. The expected failure had become an undeniable triumph. Thanks to her skill and the F-22's inherent capabilities, the stage was now set for an explosive confrontation. Armed with irrefutable data, the F-22 touched down with a feather-like grace, a testament to Nyla's unparalleled skill. The powerful thrust reversers engaged, slowing the mighty jet before it turned toward the nearest hangar. The ground crew, a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation on their faces, scrambled into position. There was no casual waving, no relaxed chatter. A grim silence hung over the tarmac, broken only by the whine of the cooling engines. This was not a triumphant return, it was a prelude to a reckoning. As the canopy hissed open, a gauntlet of stern faces awaited her. Colonel Vance stood at the edge of the immediate exclusion zone, flanked by several grim-faced senior officers. Their expressions were tight, unreadable, but the subtle tension in their posture betrayed their disquiet. The same senior officers who had watched Miller publicly humiliate Nyla were now watching her return from a mission they had deliberately engineered to be her undoing. The irony was palpable. Nyla disembarked, her movements precise, unhurried. She descended the ladder, her gaze meeting Vance's. She offered no salute, no deferential gesture. Her posture radiated controlled power. Vance, a man accustomed to unquestioning deference, bristled imperceptibly. "Captain Rhodes." Vance's voice was flat, betraying nothing. "Proceed immediately to the main debriefing room. Security protocols have been elevated. Your flight data is already being extracted." "Understood, Colonel," Nyla replied, her voice equally devoid of warmth. She did not wait for him, striding directly towards the debriefing building, her flight helmet tucked under her arm. The silent procession of officers followed, their footsteps echoing on the hard concrete. The main debriefing room was stark, sterile, and already packed, beyond Vance and his immediate entourage. Nearly 24 high-ranking officers filled the seats, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. A large display screen dominated one wall, currently blank. This was no routine debrief. This was an inquisition, a public tribunal in all but name, orchestrated to either confirm Nyla's failure or, as it was now becoming clear, to manage an unforeseen catastrophe. As Nyla entered, the buzz of hushed conversation died. All eyes were on her. She walked to the front of the room, taking a position facing the assembly, not behind a podium, but standing freely, a silent challenge. Vance moved to a control panel, his fingers flying across the keys. "Captain Rhodes, we have preliminary data on your mission," Vance stated, his voice now amplified through the room's sound system. "Your engagement of unknown aerial contacts in Sector Gamma 7. Explain your actions." He paused, a deliberate, theatrical beat, expecting her to explain away some perceived error. The screen behind him flickered, beginning to display telemetry and sensor logs. "My actions were in direct accordance with my orders." "Colonel," Nyla stated, her voice clear, resonant, and devoid of any defensive tone, "I identified the contacts, I interdicted them, and I collected irrefutable evidence of their true nature." Vance's expression tightened. "Irrefutable, Captain. Our initial analysis suggests a deviation from expected protocols. Your method of engagement was unorthodox. You did not destroy the targets as per standard engagement doctrine. My orders were to eliminate hostile intent." "Colonel," Nyla countered, her gaze unwavering. "Not to destroy, I identified their signatures. They were military drones, American military drones, to be precise, and they were deliberately spoofing hostile IF." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Some officers leaned forward, their expressions shifting from apprehension to outright shock. Vance's face remained impassive, but a flicker of something close to panic crossed his eyes. He quickly adjusted a setting on the console, trying to control the narrative. "Captain, these are highly classified drone platforms. Their presence in the exercise was for testing purposes only. Your claim of spoofing is unsubstantiated." Vance's voice was rising, a desperate attempt to regain control. "Unsubstantiated, Colonel?" Nyla asked, a faint, almost imperceptible hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain this." She gestured to the screen. "Air traffic control, display sensor, fusion overlay of 902's engagement of target Echo 3. The screen behind Vance flared. The previously raw telemetry was overlaid with a complex, detailed sensor fusion display. It showed the F-22's targeting lock on one of the drones. But more damning, it showed the precise, non-lethal impact of her practice missile on the drone's primary IFF transponder. And then, the critical data of the drone's emergency beacon, now transmitting its true unmasked IFF signature, clearly identifying it as a classified USAF reconnaissance platform. Not a hostile unknown, adjacent to it, a clear, time-stamped log of the drone's command and control signal origin, tracing back to a secure network within the very base they were on. The room erupted. Whispers turned into shocked exclamations. The senior officers leaned closer, their faces aghast as the irrefutable evidence filled the screen. The implications were chilling. Not only had Nyla proven her skill, but she had also exposed a deliberate, high-level attempt to compromise her mission, to create a false flag scenario using classified assets. The anomalies were a setup, and Nyla had dismantled it with surgical precision. Vance stared at the screen, his face ashen. His carefully constructed facade had shattered. The public confrontation had been turned against him. Captured live on the base's internal debriefing network, witnessed by dozens of high-ranking officers. His attempted sabotage had just become a spectacular act of self-incrimination. The power had shifted irrevocably. From the orchestrators of the test to the pilot who had navigated it with lethal grace, turning their weapon against them. The silence that followed was not of awe, but of condemnation. The silence in the debriefing room was a tangible thing, heavy with the weight of revelation. Every officer present stared at the large display screen, where the F-22's sensor data irrefutably showed the true identities of the anomalies. Classified military drones, deliberately spoofing hostile IFF. The implications were shattering. It wasn't just a test. It was a setup designed to compromise a pilot, using highly sensitive assets. Colonel Vance, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror, stumbled back from the control panel. His carefully constructed trap had snapped shut on his own fingers. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The air crackled with the sudden, sharp shift in power dynamics. "Colonel Vance," a stern voice cut through the stunned silence. General Armstrong, the highest-ranking officer present, a formidable woman with an unyielding gaze, rose from her seat, her eyes, usually calm, now blazed with cold fury. "Is this data accurate? Are these indeed our assets, deliberately masking their IFF and being controlled from within this facility?" Vance, regaining a fraction of his composure, stammered, "General, there must be some misunderstanding, a glitch in the system. These were experimental platforms. We were simply assessing a pilot's response to ambiguous threats." His voice was weak, desperate. Nyla, standing tall and unwavering, interjected, "General, the data is unambiguous. The F-22 sensor fusion system recorded the true IFF signatures, the command and control frequencies, and the flight parameters. These drones were programmed to act aggressively, mimicking hostile intent, while suppressing their true identification. This was not an assessment of my response to ambiguous threats. This was a deliberate attempt to force an engagement with friendly assets, or to create a scenario where I could be accused of recklessness." The room erupted into a clamor of voices. Officers murmured angrily, some rising from their seats, their faces etched with disgust. The idea of using classified, high-value assets to deliberately put one of their own pilots in such a compromised position, especially after a public incident of racial insubordination, was unthinkable. The breach of trust was profound. General Armstrong slammed her hand on the table, the sharp crack echoing through the room. "Silence," she commanded. "Colonel Vance, your explanation is insufficient. Highly classified assets were used in a manner that jeopardizes operational security and places a commissioned officer in undue risk. This is a profound dereliction of duty, if not outright sabotage." She turned her gaze to Nyla. "Captain Rhodes, your actions saved classified platforms from destruction and exposed a severe breach of protocol. Your professionalism and skill under extreme duress are exemplary." Then her eyes swept back to Vance and his immediate subordinates, who now looked like cornered animals. "Effective immediately, Colonel Vance, you are relieved of command. You are to surrender your credentials and leave this debriefing room under military police escort. Lieutenant Colonel Davis," she gestured to one of Vance's flunkies, a man whose face had gone pale, "you are also suspended pending a full investigation into your involvement in this exercise. Anyone else connected to the planning or execution of this operation will be identified and face disciplinary action." Before Vance could protest, two military police officers, who had entered the room silently upon Armstrong's signal, stepped forward. They moved with swift efficiency, taking Vance's credentials and escorting him out, his face a mask of shock and public humiliation. Lieutenant Colonel Davis, trembling, also complied, his career effectively over. The scene was captured live on the base's internal security cameras, which fed directly to command centers across the installation. The entire base was witnessing the dramatic fallout. News of the incident, sparked by Miller's earlier outburst and Nyla's dramatic F-22 flight, had already begun to spread like wildfire. Now, with the public suspension and arrest of senior officers, the story was becoming a full-blown scandal. The public backlash had begun, not from an external source, but from within the military itself. As officers reacted with outrage to the betrayal of trust and professionalism, Nyla watched, her expression unreadable. She had not sought this vengeance, but it had arrived with swift, undeniable force. Her quiet defiance had ripped through the carefully constructed facade of power and exposed the corruption beneath. The atmosphere in the room, once charged with accusation against her, was now thick with the immediate consequences of the exposed truth. The shift was absolute. The oppressive power structure had been dismantled, at least for now, by the very person they had sought to break. The groundwork for further justice had been laid, raw and undeniable. The immediate aftermath in the debriefing room was a whirlwind of motion. General Armstrong moved decisively, issuing orders to her staff. A full internal investigation was initiated, and the room emptied as officers, now visibly shaken, dispersed, their hushed conversations filled with the terms court-martial, treason, and cover-up. Not and Nyla remained, a solitary figure in the center of the sudden calm, watching the ripple effects of her actions. General Armstrong approached her, her gaze steady, almost regretful. "Captain Rhodes, what you uncovered today, it's deeper than just Miller's prejudice or Vance's ambition. This drone exercise was highly irregular, authorized only by a select few. The way they tried to frame you, to force a friendly fire incident or a pilot error narrative, it suggests a motive beyond merely silencing a capable officer." "I concur, General," Nyla stated, her voice even. The sophisticated nature of the drones, the deliberate spoofing, the coordinated attempt to put me in an impossible situation. This wasn't a simple mistake. It was engineered. "Indeed," Armstrong said, a grim line forming on her lips. "And the fact that the control signals originated within this base, from a secure network that Vance shouldn't have had complete access to, it points to collusion, a network." The investigation began with rapid, surgical precision. The military police, now fully briefed and galvanized, swept through the base. Key personnel involved in the anomalies exercise were detained. Sergeant Miller, still in military police custody, found himself interrogated with a ferocity he hadn't anticipated. His initial defiance crumbling under the weight of his superior's downfall. His crude racial slurs now seemed trivial compared to the systemic corruption Nyla had inadvertently exposed. Nyla, however, wasn't content to simply be a witness. She became an active force. She provided precise technical details of the F-22's sensor readouts, explaining the intricacies of the drone's spoofing mechanisms and the exact data that proved their origin. She meticulously recreated the flight path and engagement sequence, highlighting the calculated risk she had been forced to take. Her precision, her clear, articulate explanations, and her unwavering composure during hours of interviews cemented her credibility, leaving no room for doubt or evasion. "The objective wasn't just to make me fail," Nyla explained to a team of military investigators led by a stoic Major Ramirez from the Inspector General's office. "It was to create an incident that could be used to justify something else, perhaps a new procurement contract for a superior drone defense system, or to discredit a rival program. The drones weren't just ambiguous threats, they were a pretext." Her insight proved chillingly accurate. As investigators dug deeper, they unearthed layers of financial irregularities and clandestine lobbying efforts connected to a shadowy defense contractor, Aegis Dynamics. This company specialized in advanced drone technology and counter-drone systems. Documents discovered in Vance's encrypted files revealed large, undeclared payments and communications between him and Aegis Dynamics executives. The exercise Nyla had flown was designed to showcase the vulnerability of current air defense systems to advanced drone threats, thereby creating a perceived need for Aegis Dynamics' expensive, unproven counter-drone solutions. Nyla's exposure of the drone's true nature, their military origin, and precise control had blown apart this elaborate scheme. The narrative quickly shifted from a simple case of racial prejudice and insubordination to a full-blown military corruption scandal. The public backlash, initially focused on Miller, now broadened to include the systemic issues exposed by Nyla's actions. News outlets picked up the story. The initial reports of black female pilot humiliated, then flies F-22, morphing into military corruption uncovered by pilot's defiance. The security camera footage of Vance's public suspension from the debriefing room, leaked by an anonymous source within the base, fueled the media frenzy. The higher echelons of the military, initially trying to contain the damage, found themselves forced to embrace a public commitment to transparency. General Armstrong, recognizing the political and ethical imperative, became Nyla's most ardent, if quiet, Supporter. She understood that Nyla was not just a victim, but the key to rooting out a deeper rot. Nyla, now under constant media scrutiny, used her newfound platform strategically. She gave controlled interviews, focusing on the systemic issues rather than personal grievance. "This isn't about me," she stated in one televised address. "It's about integrity. It's about ensuring that those who serve our nation are held to the highest standards, free from prejudice and corruption." Her words resonated, turning the chaos she had triggered into a powerful momentum for change. The path was now clear for a final confrontation, not just with her immediate oppressors, but with the architects of the systemic corruption. The climactic moment arrived not on a battlefield, but in the hushed, cavernous chamber of a congressional hearing room. The air was thick with tension, flashing cameras, and the murmur of anticipation. The House Armed Services Committee had convened an emergency session, galvanized by the escalating scandal that Nyla Rhodes's actions had triggered. News of the F-22 incident, Sergeant Miller's arrest, Colonel Vance's suspension, and the deepening investigation into Aegis dynamics which had consumed national headlines, painting a stark picture of corruption at the highest levels. At the witness table sat the CEO of Aegis Dynamics, a man named Sterling Thorne, sleek, impeccably dressed, and radiating an air of untouchable power. Beside him sat General Marcus Thorne, Sterling's older brother, a four-star general previously considered untouchable, now implicated as the hidden architect of the drone exercise. Their faces, normally composed, betrayed a flicker of anxiety under the relentless glare of the media and congressional scrutiny. They had dismissed the scandal as an isolated incident, a rogue colonel's error, but the evidence was mounting. Nyla Rhodes, sharp and composed in her dress uniform, was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand, her presence commanding immediate silence. She was no longer just a pilot, she was the unflinching embodiment of integrity, the symbol of resistance against a corrupt system. Her testimony was precise, factual, and devastating. She presented the F-22's raw telemetry data, the specific IFF codes, the command and control frequencies she had logged, and the precise, non-lethal methods she had used to force the drones to reveal their true identities. She narrated the deliberate attempts to frame her, connecting them directly to the exercise designed to justify Aegis Dynamics' overpriced, unnecessary counter-drone systems. "General Thorne, Mr. Thorne," Nyla's voice resonated through the room, cutting through the thick, legalistic jargon. "Your drones, designed to simulate hostile threats, were deployed in a manner that jeopardized national security and put American lives at risk, all to manufacture a perceived need for your company's products. This wasn't a test, it was a conspiracy. And I have the final piece of evidence." A collective gasp went through the room. The committee chairman, a grizzled veteran congressman, leaned forward. "What evidence, Captain?" "During the engagement, the F-22's Advanced Signals Intelligence Suite recorded more than just the drone's IFF," Nyla stated, her eyes locking onto General Marcus Thorne. "It also logged an encrypted audio transmission, a direct command override that forced one of the drones to accelerate aggressively towards my aircraft, putting me into a no-win scenario, either destroy classified friendly assets or be deemed incapable. This override was initiated remotely, and after forensic analysis by military intelligence, its origin has been definitively traced." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. The override command came from a secure, encrypted satellite phone linked to General Marcus Thorne's personal communication network. It was a direct, unscheduled order, given during the exercise, designed to force a hostile engagement. On cue, Major Ramirez, from the Inspector General's office, stepped forward, holding a secure tablet. With Captain Rhodes's authorization, and supported by irrefutable digital forensics, we have the decrypted audio file, complete with voice recognition analysis. The voice issuing the override order is indeed General Marcus Thorne. The room erupted, journalists scrambled, flashbulbs exploded, and the committee members exchanged shocked, furious glances. General Marcus Thorne, who had maintained a facade of calm disdain, visibly flinched. His eyes widened, a desperate, cornered look replacing his arrogance. Sterling Thorne, his brother, slumped in his seat, his face ashen, the ultimate oppressor. The hidden hand pulling the strings had been exposed not by speculation, but by irrefutable, technological proof provided by the very pilot they sought to destroy. The chairman's gavel hammered loudly, struggling to restore order. General Thorne, do you deny this? Marcus Thorne, his face a mask of defeat, could only shake his head slowly. The evidence was absolute. Nyla's F-22, designed for combat, had instead become a forensic tool, meticulously recording the very data that would dismantle a multi-million-dollar corruption scheme and expose a high-ranking general. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. General Marcus Thorne was arrested on the spot, stripped of his rank and escorted from the hearing room by military police, his illustrious career ending in public disgrace. Sterling Thorne was taken into custody by federal agents, facing charges of conspiracy, fraud, and endangerment. The entire leadership of Aegis Dynamics was now under intense scrutiny, their stock plummeting. Nyla Rhodes, however, remained at the stand, the calm center of the storm. The nation watched, witnessing not just the downfall of powerful, corrupt individuals, but the rise of an undeniable symbol of integrity. She had navigated prejudice, faced a deadly setup, and turned the chaos into a relentless pursuit of justice. Her quiet resolve, her unwavering skill, and her absolute commitment to truth had not only cleared her name, but had also ignited a movement. She wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was a beacon, proving that even against overwhelming odds, defiance rooted in truth could bring down the most entrenched corruption. The story of Nyla Rhodes, the black woman who was told to take off her uniform, then flew an F-22 Raptor and exposed a vast conspiracy, became a legend, a testament to the power of one person to shift the scales of justice.